Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Coach Phyllis Washington, who is one of our co-authors in the Get Published business book. Coach Phil, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. I'm glad to be here. Appreciate it.
Well, we are thrilled to have you, Coach. Are you ready to get started?
I am, sir. Let's go.
All right. Question number 1. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
Well, the first thing I would give them, the piece of advice I would give them is get help. Don't try to do it alone. And also, don't let your mindset fool you into thinking that your story doesn't have value, or thinking maybe you would, who would be really interested in what you have to say. People are really interested, and they want to hear your story, the real you, and understand why your story is so important to you. Just write from your heart is what I would say.
Absolutely. Done is better than perfect, and don't be afraid to take the plunge.
Absolutely.
Well, Coach, what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
Well, in the process of publishing, I think editing is definitely the most difficult part. But, also for me, Paul, was, getting started. What do I really want to write about? And figuring all that out, that was hard for me as well.
And yet you absolutely crushed it.
I did, with your guys' help.
So let's talk a little bit about marketing. So as you know, with our launch, we used a few different marketing strategies. So I'd like for you to please share a marketing strategy that was used as part of the book launch that you feel worked well. And I know one of the things in particular was that you were on our author panel during our book launch party at Texas Live.
Yes, that was a great promotion for me, being on the panel, and I thank you for that opportunity. But additionally, I've been promoting the book on LinkedIn. It's been a great way to talk about the book, talk a little bit about my philosophy as a coach, and just giving me a way to promote my business from a way that I hadn't promoted it before. So definitely LinkedIn has been a great plus for me.
And for our audience, our business book featured 75 amazing authors that were all sharing their story in about 500 to 750 words. And Coach, her chapter was amongst the best ones in there. Really enjoyed having you as part of the project, and I love that you're also all in with the LinkedIn strategy, because that's one thing that we're huge believers in, because LinkedIn, in my view, is the best social media outlet out there, especially for brand building and for business building.
Totally couldn't agree with you more, Paul. Absolutely.
Well, let's take a little deeper dive into the author panel too. So kind of walk us through that experience and also taking part in that. Because if I remember correctly, you were with, you had quite the eclectic group with you, the other 5 authors in particular, as part of that panel.
Yes, that was so fun, being there with just a different group of people, and just our chapters being very different, all the way down to little Libby and Michael, talking about, what was important for them in their experience. And I think people really appreciated the panel there, just to get a little segment of what was important for us, and get a viewpoint why it was important to write our chapter and that experience from that viewpoint.
Well, and the thing with that panel too, we try to make it as easy as possible and such a smooth process. I think we mainly focused on, ironically enough, around 5 questions, kind of like the podcast, so to speak. and just asking you guys those different questions. It was great because everyone had a different thing that they were sharing with that. So with advice for authors, about the publishing side of things, and then just about really getting out your story. You mentioned Libby, 8-year-old author on the show, with the book chapter, and then also as part of that panel. I mean, we had an 8-year-old, we had an 82-year-old, and we had everyone in between. It was a really cool experience.
It really was. It was so much fun and just eye-opening, and also really it was touching heart, from, very heartful, and just hearing how people's passion poured out during that process too.
Well, I'm pretty sure you were convinced because you were the first person that signed up for our second book that we're launching next year. So you got in there and got chapter 1 immediately. So we're excited to have you as part of this.
I'm excited about that. And it's like, wow, that may be a tall order, but I'm just excited to be a part of the next adventure. And I look at it like that and just can't wait.
Well, speaking of books, I'd like to know what is your favorite book and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Well, Paul, honestly, it was really kind of hard to kind of decide what my favorite book is. So what I did was look at what's been my favorite book, this last year. And I'd have to say that my favorite is The Game of Life and How to Play It by Florence Scovel Shinn. Now, that book was written, I believe, in 1945, and it's still so true today, and I love those foundational books like that. But what I've learned is from this book is to pay attention to my thoughts and focus on what I want to create versus what I don't want. How, our negative thoughts can put us in our own way and sometimes keep us from succeeding. I really feel deeply that God and the universe are unlimited resources, and they are there to help us, support us to be successful. And sometimes we don't maybe appreciate that so much.
And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
Well, I'll have to go back to the same book, but it says most people consider life a battle, but it's not a battle. It's a game, and this is by Florence Scovel Shinn, because oftentimes we set up ourselves to fail because we're resisting what is, instead of seeing how it may serve us, and maybe ask the question, why is this in front of us, and how can we leverage it to help others and ourselves? To me, we look at life, if we look at life as more of a game, it can be from a perspective of being more strategic from life and business, and can be played and won in a much more interesting way. So that's what I really have gotten from that quote.
Well, Coach, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
The best way to find me is at my website, which is www.coachphil, that's PHYL.com, coachphil.com.
Well, Coach, thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate it, and I really enjoyed being on your show today.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how you can be featured in our brand new Get Published business book, go to getpublishedpodcast.com.